am here as an architect to present the need for the role of architecture to be an intermediary between society and earth. For centuries, we know that architecture has always represented the cultures and the society. But more importantly, it also played an important role in shaping or influencing communities and cultures. So what role can architecture play today to influence communities to move away from a human-centric design where we keep human at the epicenter and move away to a biospheric, or where we respect all species of the planet and then we design? So that is what the talk is going to be about. So the talk is divided into 3 parts. Part A is to understand the violence and the scale of climate change. Part B is to set up the stage of developing, or the need for developing, an environmental ethic. And part C is the role of architecture as an intermediary. My talk is going to move into architecture and how design plays a role, is about understanding urban sprawl or suburban sprawl. We assume that the sprawl will be relative to the increase in population. That is an assumption. That's a natural human tendency to assume that. But in reality, it has been seen in many parts of the world that the sprawl is 6 times the increase in population. So how are we calculating and how are we spreading out? And do we even calculate the hidden social cost? The only cost that is usually calculated before it gets on to development or execution is the cost of laying the road, because even the sewage pipes come later. First the roads come, right? They don't calculate what is the hidden social cost, what is the hidden environmental cost, what is the hidden health cost for the people who are occupying that land. Do we have a cost? Do we calculate it? No, nobody has an answer. So finally, it boils down to our arrogance that technology and money can solve all problems. But we are slowly realizing that we need to be more humble, and our health is more important. That means planet health is important, right? Coming to buildings and architecture, we can see that almost nearly 50% is from building construction and maintaining that building. So construction may be a small aspect, but the life cycle of the building is much longer. So the carbon emissions has to be calculated for the life cycle of the building and not just for the building, right? Construction. So it plays a huge role. So we need to play a large role as architects to reduce the carbon emissions. And how do we do that? So this is where the part C comes in, where design plays an important role, and the power of spaces is what we need to understand. And how do we keep our cities alive? Because I talk about city as a living entity rather than as a physical entity. Unless we consider all the multiple layers of the city as a living entity, we will not really give it that much importance or significance. So there are various levels that an architecture or an architect can intervene with the government, with the society, with the earth. There's a simple example. It's slightly offbeat. It's not a physically built environment, but it's about imagining a space that is inclusive to all. A happy city also is a city that can be alive. A happy city, that means a community will feel like they belong and they will take care of the city. So this is about including every single person in the city, whether they're handicapped, whether they're blind, whether they're spastic, or whatever it is. So we had proposed a small space in Cubbon Park, which is a park in Bangalore. It's a huge old park in Bangalore. And for many of you who know, there is a small dog park also. The size of a dog park is all we asked to make it friendly for all people, inclusive primarily. But it was objected, not by the government, but by the citizens. Unfortunately, till date, we do not have a proper space, whether it's pathways, whether it's crossing the roads, or whether it's even climbing a bus. It is difficult. So we are not designing the cities for all. We're designing the cities for the privileged. So, but the government was very good in this case. So they said, let's do it somewhere else, but on a much larger scale, not just having a small intervention, but let's create a forest park, not a city park, but a forest park. Because we've not had parks in more than, I think pre-independence was Cubbon Park and Lal Bagh, right? Post that, we've not had a single park, not had a single large development. So now in North Bangalore, we have proposed a forest park so that the community comes closer to nature. When you bring in community closer to nature, they will learn to respect it, revere it. And once they respect it, they will take care of it. So rather than forcing a policy saying if you don't do this, you will be fine, we are trying to work out on the other way where you're trying to make them feel empathy for all. So this is again a small insertion, multiple insertions across the outskirts of the city that we have proposed as a problem that we saw. Many a times when a child and a mother or a lady goes, wants to take a bus at 11 in the night or 12 in the night, you're waiting at the bus stand, there's no toilet. There's not even a space around where you can buy water easily if you have a child next to you, right? What do? So we proposed this as a solution because we felt we were facing the same problem ourselves. As a bus stand that also works as a safe zone for women and children. And it kind of becomes like a laboratory or a design, where they can learn the design language of what it is to be sustainable, what it is to be self-sufficient. So this bus stand has solar panel so that it has energy from its, generates enough electricity for itself. Charging port, because a lot of times your phone dies and again you're not able to access anybody. A small toilet, a smart toilet. A little seating, convenience store, a change room if you're coming with a little baby or an infant, and a trash bin that can compost, right? Very simple, very cost effective. Hopefully it will get implemented, because a lot of times we find the problem, we find the solution, we take it to the government. Sometimes we have to wait 10 years, sometimes we may have to wait 1 year. But we don't give up and we keep trying. So this has been accepted, we just don't know when it will be implemented. Now, coming back to water, right, revering water. Like I said, in our scriptures, it has been clearly written that water is the biggest healer, it's the best medicine. Now, if you pollute our best medicine, how do we heal ourselves? We can't. So how do we bring back that reverence? The way it can be brought back again is development along water, like how it used to be done historically. All the developments happened alongside the lakes and the rivers and all that. So bring back commons. Development, I don't mean by physical development, but bring back urban commons. A space where it's a non-consumption space, a space where people come together, whether it is to discuss about politics or whether it's just to, come together as a community. But you need these spaces for discussion. And if it's by the water, they start respecting the water, they start revering the water, because they know the power that water can have on a human body, psychologically. Going again a little further so that people really understand how water affects us, we did this little research and these diagrams. So we marked every part of the body that is affected by polluted water. So it's pretty much every part of the body. It spares no part of the body. So we know the importance of water. That was one diagram we did. We did another diagram where there's blue, green, gray water that is consumed by any product, right? So we marked how much water is consumed by each product. So similar to how we buy a product, a vegetable, if this labeling is done, instead of only calories, if the water consumption labeling is done, maybe it gives us a better, more informed decision as to during which part of the year, which vegetable should I buy. Because a lot of times we export vegetables which are high on consumption of water when the city itself is under drought. But there's no policy which stops export of vegetables, because there's no calculation which says this is the amount of water you're exporting when we are running short of water. Whereas the public spaces is what is for all. If we want the equality, if we want people to come together, it has to be the public spaces. So money has to be spent on public space. And what are public spaces? Libraries, museums, or just parks, or coming together, right? So we are talking to them about creating museums. So one museum that we recently completed, of course, this is for a private party. It's a jewelry museum. It's a 150-year-old entity who wanted to talk about history, art, tradition, and culture. So we designed it. But at the same time, with the government, we are now designing a constitution museum. We're designing a forest museum. So we propose it. Like I said, sometimes it gets accepted. We're also trying to tell people, the KPCL, Karnataka Power Corporation, to do a power generation museum, because Bangalore was one of the first in Asia to get power, electricity. But how many people know that? We don't. Where do we go if you have free time? You have to go to a mall, because our social spaces are so little, right? So the intellectual quest in a child cannot be developed unless we have public spaces. If the quest is not there, how will they even understand why climate change is important? They need to have that exposure, they need to have that connection. So now coming to buildings, so I'm just going through a slice of different types of work where architecture can engage with society and protect the nature, right? So this was Puma's first global retail building across the world where they wanted to go net zero. Now, retail, as you know, has complete glass, and you cannot have a single openable glass for safety reasons, security reasons. That's a precondition. And they need a lot of glazing so people can see what they're going to buy. These two are non-compromisable. So what do? So you want a building with no AC because you want net zero, right? But they want a building with completely glass enclosed. So that's the variables that are completely opposing. So we had to go back to the drawing board and basically take knowledge from traditional building techniques, not from the advanced technology. We went back to hundreds of years back and said, what is it we can do? Very simple. Earth below ground, 4 meter below ground, is always at a constant temperature. That's basic engineering, right? So that's what the people did long ago, thousands of years ago. They put in the hot air below, so it traversed the ground, the length of the pipe was calculated, so it had that much time to let go of the heat and become cool air, right? So it's like pre-cooled air and free. So we did that, and then the pre-cooled air will come in from the ground, not from the top. Simple reason, we don't need to cool beyond 7 feet. Human height is only 7 feet. Why do we need to waste money cooling the air above? So it was pre-cooled air that came down to the floor and the cool air came up. And what happens after that? Once it becomes hot with people using, you're breathing in, breathing out, it becomes hot air. Again, old philosophy or old, just basic technique, hot air is lighter, it rises up, cool air is heavier, right? So the entire 2 floors, it's a ground plus 2 plus terrace. So the first and second floor, what we did is we made it smaller than the ground floor. On all 4 sides, there's space. So daylight can enter from the roof and hot air can go from the ground to the top. Just 2 simple principles, and we were able to achieve what we needed. They didn't need AC, even though every single glass was closed. And we were able to achieve without compromising the aesthetics of design, because that is primarily most important. You cannot convince a client saying, I'll make you a machine that is efficient. You need to design something that you can build memories, you can have an experience, and you can remember that space, right? So we need to find the balance. It's again about architecture connecting. This is for students. It's a congregation for hall for 1,000 students in Chikmagalur. And it's a beautiful site with hills all around. So we want to open up the space, the congregation hall, rather than having closed environments, open up the space so we kind of make the views to the hills. So on a daily basis, they're appreciating the view that they're getting and they're connecting with nature in some way. You're merging the outdoors and the indoors. We also work on retrofitting of existing buildings rather than always telling them to demolish, because that's the easier way out. Definitely it's easier for an architect where we are not renovating. We're rather just breaking it down, start from scratch, we'll finish it and give it to you in a timeline, right? But retrofitting is a challenge. But I think it's a good thing to do if you want to save your resources. So this is a project where we retrofitted an old building. It was like a shed, a really dirty shed which nobody realized why we would want to keep. But we retained it and brought in the character of the old with the new and the fusion. But keeping in mind, respecting the nature, we did not cut a single tree, but actually made the building kind of weave around the trees. So it was like the building was in the park, not like we introduced landscape next to the building. So these are just views of how we negotiated with the existing. This is another house of how, again, we're talking about recycling, upcycling. So upcycling is another, thing that we recommend to clients, where if you see this column, that red column in the first slide, if you see, it's a very old column that was discarded. So we bought it from a Gujri and we said, let's use it, as a frontage to the puja room. So that's upcycling. This is a building that we've done for Karnataka Power Corporation. They have occupied this about 2 years back and they're really happy with it. the vision was very clear that they wanted to set an example of being efficient because they themselves are the power generators, right? And in the last 2 years, they have not turned on the air conditioning, even though it's a 2 lakh square feet building. So you can just imagine how simple the solution is. If a government building can run on comfortable conditions and can look like an IT office but not run AC, why is it difficult for corporate offices who have probably 10 times the amount of money to spend on buildings to not follow these simple principles of cross ventilation and daylighting and using natural materials? There's nothing complicated or high-end technology in this. And this is the second greenest building, government building in Karnataka, in whatever way they measure. But for us, how we measure it is that are the people who are occupying it happy? Do they feel like coming to work? They're not falling sick? And can they build memories in that space? I think if we've answered those questions, we are happy. We are not calculating the rest of it. There's another building that we're doing again for Karnataka Power, but in Raichur. For those of you who don't know where Raichur is, it's in North Bangalore. It's either hot or very hot. And this building is right where their 8 thermal power plants are. So it's an extremely harsh condition where within 5 minutes your face becomes black because it's such fine coal dust. And that's the kind of conditions our people are made to work in. So we wanted to design a building that kind of softens the space for them, that allows them to actually walk outside without having to feel that they need to run inside. So we wanted to create spaces again like by the water, by the landscape, where they can actually relax. They find that space for introspection. That is what we wanted to create, and yet at the same time imbibe the traditional building knowledge, which was, for one example, I'll tell you. In old temples or things, you have 3 feet walls, 4 feet walls, right, to cut down heat. We can't do that today. But how do we translate it and how do we make it work today? So that's a system of layering what we're talking about. System of layering where the outermost layer is like a jali or holes so that the wind enters through these small pockets. The second layer is the water body or evaporative cooling, so the water absorbs the heat and then the air becomes a little cooler. Then you have the third layer, which is the building fins. That is the horizontal and vertical shading device. These are all old, simple technology, simple ways of designing. And you also have the landscape. So with these 4 layers, you're automatically reducing the heat that enters the building. So that's one system of translation. And of course, like I said, cross ventilation, courtyards, idea of courtyards. So every space in this building, this is almost complete, maybe another 3 months it should be completed. Every space at any point, whoever is sitting will be able to see nature and will be able to see daylight. That was our idea, that it has to soften their working conditions. And they're really excited about this building coming up at a very, very minimal cost. Like I said, these are the elements, the water, the landscape, the skin, the fins, all simple elements that come together holistically to give a solution for the people to occupy the building. So to summarize it, what I'm trying to say is that we need to rethink of our commons or the urban commons where we come together, which is what will give an identity, which is what will bring that community bonding to the society so we actually protect our cities. And it's about learning to live in a diminished world in the sense that not to do something that's not required, but rather prioritize. Like, I'll give you another example of prioritization. We have so many forests in the country. How do you prioritize which forest needs how much money? There's no analysis. It's just a random basis of who pitches for it or who lobbies for it. But how do we understand that the entire natural resources is going to benefit our country? It's not about benefiting a particular state. How do you prioritize? That is what it is about living in a diminished world. It's about prioritizing what we need and what should be done first and what should be done second. If we do try to come together and if we collectively work together through an interdisciplinary approach, where architecture becomes an intermediary between society and earth, we can come up with solutions and we can leave this place as a better, healthier planet for future generations. Thank you.